So coronavirus is still pretty serious, and it's developing a little bit more news that I think needs to be kind of covered here. Now, considering most of you live in the United States, some of this news is definitely going to be more primarily focused on this country, but of course there is a lot of global headlines that I do want to go ahead and involve as well. So I've been kind of covering the entire pandemic since it really kind of started because, I mean, it's definitely been the most important topic of 2020, one of the more important topics probably of my lifetime as well. And at this point, like, we actually need information about this. People need to be knowing what's going on and whatnot because it is such a serious situation. It is such a global situation that, honestly, it needs to be talked about and people need to understand what's going on. So I kind of want to start everything off here with a little bit of good news, with a good headline here. Over in New York, the coronavirus hospitalizations have fallen to their lowest number since early March. Now, obviously, here in the United States, we had some cases in February, but the virus really started to take off back in March. That was when everything really started to kind of kick off and, well, when we kind of plunged ourselves down this rabbit hole that we've kind of done here. So the current coronavirus hospitalizations in New York, which was once, of course, the epicenter of the outbreak here in the United States, has now dropped down to 743, which is the lowest level that we've seen since mid-March. Governor Andrew Cuomo, the Democrat from New York, said Saturday that the number of hospitalizations had fallen by 22 from Thursday into Friday, and credited the adherence that New Yorkers have to the health guidelines that helps beat back the virus. New York City and other places around New York have shown increased levels of mask wearing, social distancing, and whatnot compared to other places throughout the country, which honestly is probably helping them beat and combat the virus a lot more. Obviously, a lot of people live in New York. It's one of the most populous states in the United States, and of course, the biggest city in the country, New York, also resides in the state, so this is kind of in contrast, though, because mostly around, like, the South and in the West, there have been alarming spikes in cases after states had aggressive reopening plans and everything. A lot of states throughout the South and the West, you know, they saw their numbers kind of dip a little bit, and they were like, hey, let's go ahead and start reopening. Everything should be fine here. They kind of rushed everything, and the next thing you know, there's a big flood of cases coming through, and now people are getting sick again, and a lot of these states are having to reverse a little bit earlier than expected and start to kind of shut back down. For instance, Texas saw 10,000 new cases per day for several consecutive days this week, and then in Florida, which has now become kind of the new epicenter of the virus here in the US, they tallied over 10,000 new cases for the 10th time on Friday. Now, back in New York, 100 people are intubated in hospitals and 172 are being treated in the ICUs. This is according to the state's Department of Health, and Cuomo said that out of 69,817 COVID tests that were conducted on Friday, 754 came back positive for a rate of 1.08%. Now, it's a pretty stark and honestly sad news. In one Texas county, 85 infants under the age of 1 have tested positive for the coronavirus. The state is becoming one of the newest hotspots here in the United States, and since January, health authorities have identified more than 3.6 million COVID-19 cases throughout the entire United States. Throughout all of this, nearly 140,000 people have died, according to Johns Hopkins University. Now, in Texas's Nueces County, where Corpus Christi is located, the number of new coronavirus cases skyrocketed in July after a flattening trend, and the virus has now infected dozens of babies, and local officials are urging people to wear masks and practice social distancing. The director of public health for the county said, quote, "We have 85 babies under the age of 1 year in Nueces County that have all tested positive for COVID-19. These babies have not even had their first birthday yet. Please help us stop the spread of this disease." Now, as of right now, there are no additional details on their conditions, but Nueces County has had the fastest growth in new cases on a 7-day average than any other metropolitan county in the state. They've had nearly 8,100 coronavirus cases and 82 deaths linked to the virus, according to local officials. And other Texas counties such as Cameron and Hidalgo are so dire that health officials are even stocking up on refrigerated trucks to store the bodies as the morgues are filling up in these areas. And in a letter to the governor, Greg Abbott, state representatives Sheila Jackson Lee and Joaquin Castro said that their local jurisdictions should be granted the ability to issue a stay-at-home order to help try and contain coronavirus cases. The letter said, quote, "Texas is now not where it should be related to fighting COVID-19. Therefore, your office should take immediate action to rewind the effects to open the state quickly, which came about by ignoring CDC guidelines." we need to provide local authority to local counties and cities to do what is in the best interest of their communities. Now, coronavirus is getting so bad here in the United States, as a matter of fact, that there's even a little bit of worry that the stock market might plunge again. Now, this has been kind of like a consistent worry that some people have had, but in general, over the last few months, the stock market has had probably its greatest expansion in such a quickest period of time that it's ever had. As a matter of fact, many stocks skyrocketed back to near their previous positions, I guess you could say, that were there before the coronavirus hit, or they're closer. Some stocks even shot past that and are now doing better than they were a year ago. But the market has been gradually recovering. The economy is still kind of reeling from the entire thing and whatnot. There's still a lot of unemployment and whatever, but technology stocks, which have kind of helped carry the US market a lot since March, they took a pretty big hit, I should say, this week. So for the last few months, the most highly valued technology and e-commerce companies, they've just been rallying crazily, right? It's been insane to see what like Amazon, Facebook, companies like Tesla and whatnot have been able to do since this whole thing kind of broke out in recent months. But even through this public health crisis that has just completely crumbled a lot of the economy, they've been able to do pretty well. But at the conclusion of last week's trade, just on Friday, there was definitely some softness in the uptrend. But however, in the conclusion of last week's trading on Friday, there was definitely some softness in the uptrend for these tech names and whatnot, and in stocks in general, raising a lot of questions about whether a rotation from under these is going to happen. Out of Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Alphabet, which is the Google parent company, and Microsoft, only Apple actually finished the week in positive territory. Netflix was down 10.2% over the week, which was the worst weekly skid that they've had in a year. Amazon declined 7.4% and was the worst weekly drop since the period ended on December 28th. The Dow Jones Industrial Average finished better than the Nasdaq by 3.36 percentage points last week, which was actually up 2.29% versus the technology-ridden Nasdaq Composite, with a 1.08% weekly decline. This was the biggest weekly outperformance against the tech-heavy benchmark since June 5th. Now, we're going to know a lot more about the stock market here next week. As a matter of fact, nearly 500 companies will be reporting their quarterly results next week, so depending on how those kind of look for a lot of companies, that's going to help determine how the market ends up recovering this next week. IBM is going to be reporting on Monday, Microsoft on Wednesday, Intel Corp on Thursday. Tesla will also be reporting on Wednesday. That'll probably be one of the more watched stocks during that time period. On Tuesday, the Chicago Fed National Activity Index for June will be released at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. On Wednesday, a report on existing home sales for June will be released at 10 a.m. Thursday has the usual update on the weekly jobless claims at 8:30 a.m. and a report leading on economic indicators at 10 a.m. on Friday. There will be some flash PMIs watched for manufacturing and services at 9:45 a.m. and a report on new home sales for June at 10 a.m. So that's the kind of stuff that'll be determining that. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a weirder headline for Asia, though. Pirate attacks have actually doubled in Asia alone thanks to COVID. So in the first half of this year, piracy incidents doubled due to the coronavirus, according to a report by Regional Cooperation Agreement on Combating Piracy and Armed Robbery Against Ships in Asia, also known as RECAP. So the majority of these attacks took place in the Singapore Strait, but there has been a pretty big increase near Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and in the South China Sea. Now, they're saying that sometimes these pirates are actually just local fishermen who see piracy as a way to supplement their incomes, but in other parts of Asia, many are just jobless young men who have traveled to Batam or other places looking for work. Now, the global pandemic is the cause of this upward tick due to a lot of joblessness claims. Obviously, the global economy has been hit pretty hard. There's been a lot of trouble with that kind of stuff, and of course, when people, they don't have a job, they turn maybe to the worst, and in a lot of these cases, they're turning to piracy. So far, 77 seafarers were taken hostage or kidnapped for ransom since January, according to the International Maritime Bureau, and the organization upped their presence in West Africa and Peru, with the Gulf of Guinea responsible for 90% of the world's pirate attacks. Now, with Iran, the President Hassan Rouhani has estimated that up to 25 million people in the country have been infected with coronavirus, nearly double the official worldwide tally. Despite his estimate, as well as urging citizens to take precautions, the country will not reimpose lockdown restrictions. Now, this was all said in a televised address on Saturday, and he actually was referencing a new study by the Iranian Health Ministry that has not been publicly released yet, and he also didn't cite any specifics on how the estimates in these cases were reached, so at this point, take it with a grain of salt, of course. Now, the current official coronavirus case total, basically, stands at just more than 14 million, so He also said that more than 200,000 people have been hospitalized, and the report predicts that the number will soon be, quote, twice as many as well as we've seen in the last 150 days. Now, according to Johns Hopkins, 271,606 Iranians have been infected with coronavirus, with just 13,979 deaths. And apparently it has also further hurt, I guess, or crumbled, hurt, whatever you want to say, the country's severely crippled economy, which actually was already struggling due to a bunch of US-imposed sanctions. Now in Tehran, there was a spike of 2,166 cases on Saturday, and 188 deaths in 24 hours. So, authorities in Tehran have closed some public spaces like coffee shops, zoos, amusement parks, boarding schools, and indoor swimming pools, and also banned religious and cultural gatherings for 1 week. Iran is currently the hardest hit country in the Middle East, and they've also faced a lot of scrutiny about the reporting of coronavirus cases and deaths. Right now, government officials also even admit that they're probably well under the actual count. So that's all I really have to report about today with coronavirus. Of course, I'll probably make a follow-up video in a few days to kind of report the latest gatherings, I guess, on the whole situation. Thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. Thank you to my channel members. Your support helps my channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, talking about Corona, and signing out.